We're gonna, and what I mentioned is that I thought it would be good to do, how about, we'll do 1 minute grace time. So it's 7, so we will jump in 1 minute. Hey, Joel.
Hey, David. Hi, everyone. Hi, Berenice.
Oh, hey, Sharon. Didn't see you back there.
Hi, everyone. Hi, David.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi, Matthew. I see your name, but I'm not seeing you.
Oh, you don't see me?
I see your name, but I don't see your
Oh, hold on. Let me see. Let me figure that out. Hold on.
Now we're on to 2 pages.
Oh, how do you like that?
We have 38 people here. Look at that.
I'm just now.
Oh, yikes. Feedback. So, my drink.
Hey, Richard. This is so nice. So many of you guys, I see a lot of familiar names of people I haven't seen in months. So it's nice to see you, or to see your names, as well as all the new people.
Well, I'm going to mute myself.
So it's 7:01. So what we had said is that we'd give everybody a minute's grace time, which has now happened. So I think, Marty, if you're ready, I'm going to just jump in. Sounds good? Great. Well, welcome, everybody. I'm David Levinson. I know some of you, but not all of you. As I said, it's very nice to see you all. Julio, I think you're the last man standing with the COVID beard, and looks good. I'm so glad, I am thrilled, actually, that we are doing this. I have wanted to do this for years. It came about a number of years ago, and Big Sunday, a lot of you I know are familiar with Big Sunday. Some of you are new to Big Sunday. All good. Big Sunday, people think that we're a community service organization, but we're not. We're actually a community building organization, and our mission is to connect people through helping. And for some people, helping is cleaning the beach or serving a meal at a homeless shelter. For some people, it's providing legal aid or medical help. For some people, it's providing food or clothing or furniture or stuff for people. All that stuff is good and wonderful, really. But a huge part of connecting, and for you Big Sunday veterans, you know this, it is understanding one another better. It is hearing each other. It is seeing each other. It is listening to each other, and trying to figure out what makes other people tick, which I think is something that we need so badly right now in the world, with everything that we've seen in this country over the last 6 months for sure. But it's a moment where I think it's particularly important. So I'm very, very happy and very, very glad to add a discussion series to our programming of what we're doing, and Zoom makes it possible and really a very nice thing to do. So thank you guys so much. I'm really so grateful to you guys for jumping in and participating in this. And I am always very grateful to the Big Sunday staff and to Tamara Hossein on our staff, who has been coordinating all this. You've all heard from her, and I'm very, very grateful to my friend Marty Kaplan for kicking us off with this. Before I officially introduce Marty, let me just tell you, Big Sunday, I'll do the Big Sunday plug. We have lots of stuff coming up. We've been doing a lot of online programming during the shutdown. Now we're doing monthly concerts. So our next one is next Friday night, the 23rd. A couple great acts. Lace, the Naima Duo, and Sean Renner are all going to perform, always free, right at this same Zoom station, a week from Friday. The following week, October 26th through 30th, is something we're calling Wicked Week. We can't do our usual Halloween thing, Spooky Sunday, so we're doing a whole week's worth of Halloween events, everything from a costume parade to pumpkin decorating to a blood drive. You knew it was only a matter of time before I asked you to open your veins. And we will be doing our regular Thanksgiving thing we cannot do, but we are doing an online Thanksgiving event on Sunday, on November 22nd. And it should be a blast. We're expecting a big crowd for that and hope you can join us. I think this year it will be especially important to think of what we're thankful for. Depending on where we are in November 22nd, some of us might feel we have more things to be thankful for. Fingers crossed. Okay. With that, let me, we are all, oh, thank you. Okay. And tomorrow, I think there might be somebody in the waiting room. So if you
I
check.
checked and made sure that there's no one left in there. Is there any?
All right, I'll check
see?
my
Oh,
emails.
they just came.
I've been noticing some emails. Okay. So tonight, of course, what we're going to discuss for this first thing is wrath. And as I said, Marty Kaplan, who led a similar program to this a number of years ago that inspired me for this, has so graciously agreed to do it. Marty is the research professor of communication and journalism in the Norman Lear Chair in Entertainment, Media, and Society, and the director of the Norman Lear Center at USC. He's a frequent commentator on media, politics, and pop culture. And his columns, which many of you I know have read, have won 6 first-place journalism prizes from the Los Angeles Press Club. He has also been a featured contributor to Public Radio's All Things Considered and Marketplace. He's also my friend and my neighbor. He's been involved with Big Sunday for years, both on his own and with his kids. And Marty, I hope it doesn't embarrass you to say Marty's one of the few people who went on a diet, brought us his fat clothes, and never needed them back again. He's kept the weight off for years, so he is the envy of me and his friends. But most of all, I'm really happy, very happy and honored that you are part of this tonight. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marty.
Thank you, David. You may or may not know this, but what you just said is the sweetest and most important thing you could say about me. So I really do.
Well, you're welcome.
Marty, can I chime in?
What?
Can I chime in 1 second?
Sure.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name's Tamara. I have a red shirt on. I don't know what page I might be on for you. Hi, everyone. So I just want to let you know that throughout this discussion, there's going to be an option for you to raise your hand. So if you don't know how to do that, if you go on the bottom, there should be a button that says participant. If you see it, if you click there, there will be an option for you to hit raise hand. So there'll be a portion where you can talk and I will be able to unraise your hand and then you'll be able to ask questions and so forth and so forth. If you have any questions, you can put on the chat and I will be responding. If you have anything else, just let me know. All right, let it off to Marty.
Great, thank you. And it's great to see a number of familiar faces, old friends, and also to see some people I'd like to someday become old friends of. So thank you all for coming. And I know how much Big Sunday means to my community, to our community. And David, you are a hero in ways that I know you can't hear enough about. You may wonder why it is that David asked me to kick off a series about the 7 deadly sins and talk about wrath. What expertise do I have that might separate myself from you? And the answer is 3 hours on Wikipedia is what I have put in order to earn this place. So I hope I do that source proud. The 7 Deadly Sins is the series title, and because I have the privilege of starting it, I wanted to start there before going into wrath, just to give you, or getting wrathful, just to give you a sense of context. So how come 7 and what are deadly sins? Well, it comes from, the origin is the early Christian desert fathers, hermits in the desert of Egypt. And one in particular, his name was Evagrius. And Evagrius wrote in Greek, and in turn, his student, John Cassian, also a monk, wrote in Latin. And so from there, the seven deadly sins made its way into the Western Europe and ultimately to us. But there were 8, not seven deadly sins. The 8 deadly sins were gluttony, lust, greed, despair, wrath, sloth, boasting, and hubris. The translations, again, from Greek and Latin, alternate words sometimes appeared, but there were those 8. And then in the year 590 of the Common Era, Pope Gregory I decided to despair, to fold despair into sloth, and to fold boasting into despair into sloth, and boasting plus hubris became pride. And then, so that was a net, it gave him a slot to fill. So he added envy, and that's how we got to 7. So what makes them deadly sins? Well, Father Evagrius, the monk, was an ascetic. And I'll tell you what that meant. He ate only once a day and did not consume fruit, meat, or vegetables, or any cooked food. I wonder what that left him. He also refrained from bathing. His extreme diet ruined his digestive tract, and it's suspected he suffered from urinary tract stones. He did not sleep more than a third of a night and devoted much time to contemplation and prayer. So what did he mean when he made this list of 8 that then became 7? The deadly sins were evil thoughts. They were natural inclinations, passions, tendencies of being human. We all have these tendencies. But in the case of how they become a deadly sin, first is through excess. There's an intensification of what is natural to us. And then beyond an intensification, there is an abuse, a twisting, a perversion, a disorder of that intensified tendency, which makes it look as though this is, you know, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that psychiatrists use. It makes it sound as though that's what this is an early Christian father's version of. So if you twist natural tendencies made intense, what happens is they're not just thoughts anymore, they're deeds, they're immoral behavior. For example, Cain envied Abel, that was envy, but Cain slew Abel, that was a deadly sin that came of that tendency. And then when Pope Gregory canonized this list of 7, he explained, and it's come down to us, that there would be dire consequences if you let those tendencies inflame and get twisted. And the dire consequences would ultimately be that your soul would be separated from grace for eternity, which is what made them deadly. So those 7 deadly sins made their way from early Catholic theology into most branches of Western Christianity. So Anglicanism, Lutheran, Methodist, Evangelical, they all have a version of the 7 deadly sins. They also made their way into literature and into art. Dante, the Divine Comedy, is built around the idea of the 7 deadly sins. That's the structure as you go from the Inferno to Purgatory to Paradise. Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales, the Parson's Tale, the last tale, is basically about the 7 deadly sins. And in art, you might have been a fan, as I was, of Hieronymus Bosch and Bruegel, and they all have paintings in which you can see the 7 deadly sins all laid out. So when David asked me to focus on wrath, what I said to David was, you know, David, I've often said to myself, what's up with this wrath thing? So this gave me an opportunity to answer that question. So let's start with the etymology, the word itself, the origin of the word wrath. It's a strange word when you think about it. It's not the kind of word that's in normal conversation. It's a little bit like rue or woe or slew. It's got a biblical flavor to it. It's archaic. And I looked at the various words that wrath ended up at the end of the chain. So in Aramaic, ketzoff, that's where it began in the biblical text, which means rage. And then in Hebrew, za'am, which means indignation. And then in Greek, orge is the word, which doesn't mean what you think it means. What orge in Greek, the word for wrath means a swelling, a kind of steady progression, growing bigger. In Greek, in Latin, and this is where it comes closer to us, the word was ira, I-R-A, which for us becomes ire or irascible as a way of bringing it into somewhat more conversational English. In Old English, the word was wroth. Someone was wroth. And then in English, it became wrath. So if you put all those, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, in Old English, wroth means twisted, that idea of something perverted, tortured into the shape that it became. So if you put all those definitions together, what does wrath actually mean? So 5 things I find threads in there. There's anger, obviously. Wrath is hostility. This idea of a swelling, wrath is slow and building. It's not an outburst. It's not hot temper. It's not something that's easily provoked. It swells until it finally is released. It's also fierce, intense, and consuming. So it's full on hatred or rage. It also has an element of being righteous or justified. It opposes wrongdoing. It's evil. Evildoers deserve this feeling. And it also has the idea of vengeance or retribution. It's punitive. It's about getting even. So those are the strands that make up its meaning if you follow the word through the millennia. How has wrath been used? So my favorite usage of wrath, and this is now fairly old that it happened. It's from a Marx Brothers movie, an early Marx Brothers movie, Horse Feathers, which is from 1932. And there was a scene in it where Groucho Marx was playing Professor Wagstaff, who was the president of a university. And he was in his office. In his outer office was the dean waiting to see him. And Groucho was just taking his time. And his secretary comes in and says, President Wagstaff, the dean is furious. He's waxing wroth. And Groucho says, is Roth out there too? Tell Roth to wax the dean for a while. I loved that. S.J. Perlman was one of the co-authors of that script. I'd like to think that that's a line he wrote. But what are the best known uses of wrath? And I think you'll probably agree with me that the first thing that comes to mind is The Grapes of Wrath, the Steinbeck novel. And in turn, The Grapes of Wrath comes from a phrase from The Battle Hymn of the Republic, written by Julia Ward Howe, an abolitionist during the Civil War. And in turn, that phrase comes from the Christian Bible. So I just want to look for a moment at those most famous, because what they illustrate to me is, in many ways, it's the subtitle that David gave to this whole series, the 7 deadly sins. Can't live with them, can't live without them. There's a kind of double-edged sword, an ambivalence. Is wrath good or bad? Well, it depends, or it's both. And so that's something you can see in the Grapes of Wrath. I suspect many of you read it in school. Just a quick reminder, it was John Steinbeck's novel published in 1939 about the Depression, about the Okies in the Dust Bowl making their way to California, the promised land, when farmers and sharecroppers were being destroyed. If you look at how Steinbeck, when he talks about wrath, when he portrays it, what is it? Well, it's, on the one hand, it's negative. It's anger that's cultivated by hardship and hurt. It's a symptom of fear. It isn't always righteous. It's simply all that's left. I'm quoting from an article about the novel. But on the upside, it's a symbol of endurance. It's a force behind change. It's the idea that you can only push people so far. And there's a passage, I just want to read it from the Grapes of Wrath, which certainly has a lot of contemporary resonance. It's about the way in which the crops, the fruits of their labor, are being destroyed to drive prices up. The people came with nets to fish for potatoes in the river, and the guards hold them back. They come in rattling cars to get the dumped oranges, but the kerosene is sprayed. And they stand still and watch the potatoes float by, listen to the screaming pigs being killed in a ditch and covered with quicklime, watch the mountains of oranges slop down to a putrefying ooze. And in the eyes of the people, there is a failure. And in the eyes of the hungry, there is a growing wrath. In the souls of the people, the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy for the vintage. So that passage is almost at the end of the book. And as it turns out, Steinbeck didn't have a title for the book, and he asked his wife what the title ought to be, and she suggested this because she knew it from the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and then he put it in toward the end, now that he had a title, to have it lead up to it. So the Battle Hymn of the Republic was written in one morning by Julia Ward Howe in the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. in November 1861. And it begins with what the current editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, calls the most famous 12 most famous words ever published in the Atlantic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And then the rest of the stanza, which I'm sure you can sing along with me, he is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. So this is about vengeance. It's about the Lord getting vengeance on the enemies of freedom. As Jeff Goldberg points out, it's really, if you look later in the battle hymn, this vengeance is really quite intense, because in the later stanza, he says, Julia Ward Howe wrote, "As Christ died to make men holy, let us die to make men free." So it was a battle hymn, literally, for the Union soldiers going to their death, to sacrifice themselves in order to be martyrs, to redeem us for having tolerated slavery. So what are the grapes of wrath in that context? I think the place to find out is in the source where she found it, which is in the book of Revelation, which which, as you know, is about the end of the world, the apocalypse. So there are two angels, and one angel says, one angel has a sharp sickle, and the other angel says, thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses' bridles. So trampling on the grapes of wrath was God's angels releasing this vengeance of death. But it was good because of the consequence of it, which raises the question, is it okay to be wrathful? And the answer from Holy Scripture is, well, it depends on who you are. God's wrath, it turns out, is holy and always justified, and man's wrath is never holy and never justified. I mean, in the Psalms, it says, refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it only tends to evil. Whereas a passage in Romans, it says, beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, said the Lord. So that leads me, you will not be shocked, to the final thing I wanted to put on the table before our discussion, which is Trump wrath. And that starts with Trump's own wrath. I was delighted in the course of my reading to learn about a psychiatrist, Austrian-born, named Heinz Kohut, who in 1972 wrote a book called Thoughts on Narcissism and Narcissistic Rage, where he says that narcissists have two layers of rage. The first layer of rage can be thought of as a constant anger towards someone else, with the second layer being a self-aimed wrath. Now, listen to this description of the symptoms of wrathful narcissism and see if it reminds you of anyone. Narcissistic rage is the uncontrollable and unexpected anger that results from a narcissistic injury, a threat to a narcissist's self-esteem or worth. It comes in many forms, but all pertain to revenge. This rage impairs their cognition, therefore impairing their judgment. During the rage, they are prone to shouting, fact distortion, and making groundless accusations. The narcissist has a sense that things are not going the expected way, that blossoms into rages, and narcissists may even search for conflict to find a way to alleviate their own pain or suffering. So that, I think, is a working definition of the rage we see, the wrath we see in Trump. Well, what about our wrath? There is something that fans of Trump accuse people who are not his fans of, called Trump derangement syndrome. I think it's the psychiatric equivalent of fake news. If you don't like someone else's disapproval of you, you make it a derangement syndrome. But the truth is that is Trump wrath toward Trump good or bad? Well, a lot of wrath is bad for your health. here's something fascinating I came across. 2 hours after an angry outburst, the risk of having a heart attack doubles. You have a 3 times higher risk of having a stroke and a 6 times higher risk of rupturing an aneurysm in your brain. Anger weakens your immune system. It makes your anxiety worse. It's linked to depression. It worsens your lung capacity, and it shortens your lifespan. So to some degree, having a lot of wrath, like anger management to deal with this, is not good for us. But I want to end this part by asking the question, is wishing Trump ill morally wrong? In the space of last weekend, I saw a couple of pieces in the New York Times and the LA Times that spoke directly to this. One interviewed a lot of people to get their views, and the piece was called "Why Many Struggle to Feel for an Ailing Trump." This was when he was still hospitalized, and it was said that we may. Why do many people struggle? Because they are feeling something they don't want to feel or that embarrasses them. They feel glee, gloating, scorn, schadenfreude, mean-spiritedness. They're sadistic. They talk about chickens coming home to roost or bad karma. A couple of quotes from this LA Times article asking people in various cities about whether they feel for an ailing Trump. One person said, he lacks sympathy for others, so he don't get no sympathy. Another one said, do unto Trump what he has done to others. And another, it's hard to empathize with stupid. But on the other hand, there is an element of justice that is involved. And here I turn to the other article written by a professor of moral philosophy who was asked by her 7-year-old, Mommy, are you glad Trump got COVID? And where she comes down ultimately is that despite the natural tendency to want to get even, there is a legitimate, that justice, righteousness is appropriate to feel. There is a legitimate moral interest in seeing wrongdoers face consequences for their actions, face punishment for their wrongs. I also came across someone who put it very succinctly. There's a British crime novelist from the 20th century named Dorothy Sayers, Lord Peter Wimsey. She wrote that series of books, and she translated Dante, the Divine Comedy. And in the preface to the Purgatory, she said, wrath is the love of justice perverted to revenge and spite. Found that really interesting. Love of justice, but then perverted, twisted to revenge and spite. And so I'll close this setting of the table. But there was a young woman here in Los Angeles was waiting at Union Station to get her COVID test. And a reporter just found her in a crowd, 37-year-old actress. And when she was asked about, how do you feel about Trump? What she said to me is moving, and maybe I would love to think this is where I end up. And that is, she said, it says she put her hand on the heart, and she said that she had a hard time to reconcile her own spiteful reaction to Trump's illness with how she would normally behave. She said, my initial response, which truly was, I hope he dies, that really causes me suffering because I don't feel that's the kind of person that I am. But I think that's what the president brings out, even in the best of people. She goes on to say, instead of feeling that, save your scorn and use it to deliver a more stinging rebuke on election day. I think that's our opportunity to show each other as fellow citizens, as well as show other countries, that we have been misrepresented by our leader. To redeem ourselves. This is our chance of the election to redeem ourselves for the feelings of scorn by giving it a good channel rather than what our false leaders have led us to do. So I'll stop there and would love to hear what you have to think. You don't need to react to anything I said. If you, I suspect that everyone here has a point of view about wrath, and with Tamara's help, we're going to field questions. And since Zoom doesn't allow us to talk over each other, we'll trust in Tamara and technology to moderate us. And everyone should go to gallery view. Is that right, Tamara? Yeah, so
Yes.
click on gallery.
Hi, everybody. So if you can go on gallery mode and just kind of look through each page and have a little Brady Bunch welcome of who's here. If you look in the chat, I put down that it's discussion time. So if you go on the bottom, like I said earlier, there's a participants button and you can click raise hand. So this is your time to say, I have something I want to say. I have a question. I have an opinion. How do you feel about wrath? Anything and everything is welcome within reason. So please start raising your hands if you'd like to say something, and Marty will pick, and we'll start. Oh, and also, if you don't want to say something out loud, but you do have some opinion, feel free to write it out and I will read it out for you. Cool?
David.
Well, I'll say something. Am I muted or having given some thought to, especially the last part of what you've said, it's a time of great conflicting feelings about so many things that we see. And I saw one of those pieces that you mentioned in the New York Times. And I know that the woman in her article, the professor who talked to her young son, said one of her conclusions was that because in the case of Donald Trump, he is a dignified human being, we have to look at him in a certain way. And I question whether dignity is something that's naturally everybody automatically has by virtue of the fact that we are people, or is dignified something that is earned. And if dignity is not earned, does that go hand in hand with wrath or feelings of Schadenfreude, or whether it's vengeance, avenging something, getting revenge? If I'm not even sure if there's a difference. You probably have a better idea of that than I do. But I think that it's a very complicated issue that I'd be curious what other people think of in this particular case, and also with the understanding we might not all be on the same page politically. I will say for myself, when the people one by one from the Rose Garden were getting sick, there was certainly some enjoyment I felt in my heart when that happened. I not wishing them ill, but behavior has consequences that we all see and feel. So
she said that she did think that part of being civilized is that we all believe, she claims, that everybody deserves dignity. Your question is a good one. I'd love to hear what other people think.
Hey, Marty, I see that Erica has her hand up.
Great.
Hi, Erica. Would you want to chime in?
Erica might be on mute.
She's not on mute, but maybe she stepped off for a bit.
I see Erica. but her camera's not on. So maybe we'll come back to her.
Okay, so Cheryl said that the fact that we can't even trust the circumstances of his illness adds to the wrath. Without trust, how can there be compassion? If you have any opinions, please raise your hand or please comment below onto what Cheryl said or to Marty or what David said.
Well, I will say
Hi,
that,
James.
oh,
Oh.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I can't see everybody.
James Holmes, you would like to speak?
My wife that wants to speak.
Yeah, not
so-
unsurprisingly, it's me that has the mouth. My name is Beth. I'm Jim's wife and friends of the Levinsons. When I was in 7th grade, I volunteered to represent George McGovern in a debate against the kid who volunteered to represent Richard Nixon in a school debate. And I was full of anger and confusion when I didn't win the debate. I thought it just made sense that the nicer guy should win. And I took a lesson from my family that what our side felt in politics just made sense because we were always the kinder side. And the feelings I feel now, you know, we had a long time ago with different political competition. And now it's gotten so exaggerated that it is going into these feelings of helplessness and lack of compassion, because it doesn't make sense that reason isn't clear and the hate that other people feel is threatening. But the only place that it's brought me, I mean, I do have compassion in one sense that I feel our education has let people down, and we're not, our education system hasn't helped people learn how to think clearly. But I digress. A long time ago, Becca and my daughter played soccer together at school, and I learned something in its simplest incarnation when parents would scream on the sidelines at bad calls. And in its simplest, in his simplest instruction, a coach said, don't get mad and screaming bad things, just score back. The only way to win in competitive sports is to compete. And that's how desperate we all are now in telling each other to vote. And it's the only way that I've found that I can settle myself down is I'm not being heard, we are not being heard. And so we can only score. And as simplistic as it sounds, it's the only thing that sort of calmed my emotion down. And for people who, I just have to find compassion because the other choices weren't working.
So I imagine that when that avenue is taken away, when a legitimate election no longer becomes an outlet, that also makes the rage build.
Exactly. And today we don't have that. Today we only have the election. Hopefully. Nice to see everybody.
Nana is,
Okay, Marty, do you want to pick the next speaker?
You know what? Why don't you go do it? You're doing so well. Oh, I see
Okay.
lots of people are now. Okay. Ellie, let's just do a Levinson family thing here.
All right. So this has been such a hot topic in our family. And I guess I'm torn because I'm really not in general a wrathful person. And we've had many discussions about hatred, which I know is not exactly the same thing as wrath, but I'm currently experiencing both of these emotions. And they seem like very, very bad ways to feel. And yet I feel like if we eliminate this feeling, there's something that you've mentioned and Beth mentioned that is linked to the idea of justice. And it's almost like our wrath is arising. For me, hatred is rising because justice is not being done. And if I don't feel wrath, it will be a kind of impunity. And also that there's, like Beth is saying, that the wrath will take us to a positive place of voting and doing all the other things that we might be doing. And that is true. But it also is a really corrosive emotion with side effects, like me looking at people that I suspect to have different political views from mine and also feeling wrath. So my question is, what's the cutoff? Is the emotion itself, like if you feel it in a way that is spilling over into other parts of your life, what do you do about this? What would a better world look like?
It's a greate question, and maybe in the course of this, someone will be compassionate enough to answer it. I'm looking at the Susan Freudenheim. You're there somewhere with a question?
Yes, my question is, it seems like there's more wrath now than ever, and I don't think it's just Trump. I mean, Trump didn't come out of nowhere, so he's begotten more wrath. I mean, as Ellie said, she's not a wrathful person, but she's feeling more of it now. But do you see roots of this? I mean, can you talk about what you see as the roots of this prior to Trump that brought us to this place?
Well, in politics, it is usually dated to Newt Gingrich, who turned what was political combat into a moral crusade and a blood sport, and take no prisoners. And it worked for him. I mean, he got the Congress and he became speaker. And it's largely true that since then, it's been asymmetric warfare, that has been what has worked for one side, and the other side has been ambivalent about doing that because there is a sense that it violates norms. So what do you do if you care about norms and the other side doesn't care about norms? And say the same thing about facts and reality. We're supposed to have a system in which both sides are playing by a common set of facts and norms, and we don't have it. So I'm sure it goes back to about the 5th century Greeks, but in our experience, I would say that something like the early 80s was when this came in, and then blossomed in the 90s. Love to hear other people's point of view about that. David Aronson?
I wanted to make a clarification between humanity and dignity, and I don't think they're the same things. I think dignity is something, yes, that you earn or is given to you, but it doesn't just come with you automatically. But there is always humanity, and if we are for life, all right, then we have to be for life in all of its forms and choices on both ends of the spectrum. And so no matter how much we might hate, no matter how much we might be wrathful towards Trump for what he's done and what he's doing and what we expect he might do even in the future, Trump is still a human being. So we don't really want him ill as a human being, but we do want the justice that everyone has talked about in terms of what happens to the criminal when his crimes are found out.
So you can hold someone accountable for their
Yes.
actions and still be a good person.
Marty?
Yes.
I can't, not them.
Julio Claudia said, this discussion reminds me of the end of the film Inglourious Basterds, when the American soldiers burnt the Nazis inside the movie theater. I felt good about it. Must confess, till I talked to an 18-year-old who asked me if I wasn't disturbed by their similar strategy to what they did to the Jews. At this time, it is important to remember Michelle Obama's when they go low, we go high. How do you feel about that comment, Marty?
Well, I've always been ambivalent about what Michelle Obama said, because I think it speaks aspirationally to who we are, and I would like that strategy to be a winning strategy. But I also fear that the risk of that is making yourself a doormat. And I must say that for all my admiration for Barack Obama, many times during his presidency, I kept asking myself, why doesn't he learn that they are going to betray him and lie to him? And every time he tries to turn the other cheek, offer an olive branch, they will do their best to screw him. And surely there's a way of being realistic about who you're facing. On the other hand, I would like it to be that you can be clear-eyed about your opposition, but also not descend to the same level that they are. Claudia Grau?
Hi, thank you so much, Marty and David, for opening this discussion. I was really excited to come. And my thought is two wraths don't make a right. And I think the issue is that, you know, what's happening in our environment right now is that the way that Trump operates is so vengeful that it's almost an automatic response to feel vengeful, you know, and yet it's really, I'm reading that John Lewis book, Across the Bridge, and it really, he talks about the longer view, you know, that we don't want to just lose our dignity to this time. We kind of have to preserve ourselves to get through it and not fall. And like, or seeing people throw away good food or whatever, there's so much good that's being lost at this moment. And so of course you're angry. There's so much good being lost right now. And yet I know so many people do so much good. And I do feel like it's really easy to.
Claudia, Tamara, is that a problem with Claudia's sound?
Is
I
it my
can't tell.
microphone?
I think it might be. Is something rubbing against your speaker, or is that maybe somebody else?
It might
you're
be.
making
Can
noise.
you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, I'll stop moving my little thing in my computer because my daughter's watching the TV.
I think he was just being very wrathful, Claudia, and it was
I was being wrathful. Anyways, but the reality is that it's it's so chaotic. There's so much being lost at this minute. But like in the John Lewis book, which I'm really enjoying, it's, you know, the patience and the persistence of continuing to know who I am and what I can do. And even though I'm so pissed, I am so pissed, and sometimes I'm pretty paranoid. I don't want to use my energy there. I want to just, I've already voted, you know, and I'm trying to still make sure everybody I know is voting and that we've, you know, we're going over the ballots and stuff. But I do think in this terrible time, that is for me anyways, the solution is activation and being, not only being able to vote, but hopefully being awakened to a way to be a better civil participant. And anyways, that's my thought.
What Trump does to us, that's why I was so interested in the narcissistic disorder, because if any, I suspect all of us have come across people who are clinically diagnosable with narcissistic disorder, or borderline is another one. And when you relate to them, they do something to you. They bring out behavior because it's not working the way normal human interactions go. And it's kind of bewildering and disorienting, but you find that you're not you. That's what that woman was saying. And those feelings of rage, as opposed to channeling them positively through the kind of institutions we believe in, that's the disorder that we get caught up in. And those psychiatrically are among the hardest to treat. Maybe
and that's the really hard thing about right now is it's almost impossible not to be reactive. And so it's like,
right.
for me, I'm really trying to keep myself on a low flame so I don't just like whoosh, go off on the next news bite that's insane, you know?
Well, from the sound of it, you're doing well at that attempt. Leslie Mizell is here somewhere.
Hi, I'm sort of going to refer back to what you were talking about with Newt Gingrich and the early 80s, because it corresponds to when cable was expanding to the rest of the country and what was referred to at the time as narrowcasting, where there were multiple channels that of course moved into later as social media, and where most of the country started getting the news from like-minded people. And as that evolved to where we are now, it became easier to not hear from a source that was giving you both sides. So I think obviously we're at that place where we are hearing only from one source, which is added to the division.
So I'm really glad you brought that up, both because of the point you made about the bubbles that we inhabit, but also the larger point about media. So I just want to add this strand to the conversation. The scarcest commodity right now is attention. And anyone who can get our attention can monetize it by selling our eyeballs to advertisers, by getting ratings. And so if you ask what gets our attention, the same things that got our attention when we were hunter-gatherers roaming the savannah, and fear is one of them. So anything that makes us afraid, we have to pay attention to. And so does I mean, sex and novelty. And in the case of all these networks, that's how they succeed. And so we're now at the situation where it looks as though tomorrow night there will be 2 dueling simultaneous town halls with ABC and NBC competing for ratings. And which is I mean, it's kind of, just as Trump, the reality show host, is the kind of ultimate degradation of what unreality as entertainment that you pay for and create fiction into reality. Just as that's the case, so is also the competition for our eyeballs tomorrow night as a way of dissolving the norm that we had. The virus has something to do with that, but also in this case, at least one of the personalities does.
Right, and even in the mining for political money. If
Yes.
you look at the mining for money, you know, it's all negative. It's all apocalyptic. It's all, we're losing, even in the races where someone is up 10 points. Oh, it's a disaster. And I'm almost offended by it. But it's never, it's great. It's anyway. But
Well,
yeah, to your point.
I guess most of us do this, but do you all know the term doom scrolling?
I haven't heard that term.
It's what we do at night because we know there's something scary and bad out there that happened in the last 20 minutes, and we're sure we missed it. So all we need to do is scroll around and we'll find it, and we're always right. And in so doing, we are contributing either to how much money Mark Zuckerberg has, or any political party, and so we're all on the hamster wheel doing that, and it's great for the business, not so great for our digestive systems or democracy. David Weber. David around? Maybe he stepped away.
Hi, David, you need to unmute.
You would think I teach. I'm at UC too. You would think I would know to unmute. Sorry about that. But since I teach, I don't have to mute ever. So I was saying that as some people in this group of just a few, no, I have actually a very different view than the rest of you. And I'm curious that you would start at both David and you, Marty, who I don't know, but talking about the last 6 months and rage and wrath without mentioning Antifa and all the riots and the riots that even happened here. I mean, which happened, like I'm pointing to, all my stores were boarded up, and that wasn't Trump. So what's your thoughts about that? I mean, that's justice, thoughts of justice becoming, I mean, as I forget the description, becoming envy. There's a lot of envy and rage, and then the tearing down of statues, especially like Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and Frederick Douglass and all that. I mean, where does that come from? So maybe somebody besides me would like to discuss that, as opposed to just focusing on Trump, which I get my entire life. And I have many friends who have become wrathful, and they're not Trump side.
You're absolutely right to bring that up, and that is in this same period. It is that is rage, and some people characterize what they're doing as righteous retribution to oppression, but I personally have a hard time justifying any kind of violence. I mean, it becomes complicated when you start talking about war or what justifies civil disobedience beyond a sit-in. So, and Antifa complicates the discussion of that, because that is arguably not only an actual group, but it is also a way to demonize with too broad a brush a number of people who want to be peaceful protesters and have found themselves infiltrated by provocateurs who turn what could be civil dissent into violence. So I am with you. My heart breaks when I see what has happened to our city and to other cities, and I can't bring myself to agree with people that a little property damage is an okay price to pay if it will move society to address these historic wrongs. So I understand the argument, and I don't remotely reject it out of hand. You're absolutely right to bring it into the conversation. Kara Miller?
Yeah, so actually Kara's wife here, we're both here, but and our cat. But I had a sort of question for you and for the group, which is sort of seeking advice and counsel on this concept of well, let me back up and say it this way. When George Bush was elected, I started to keep a list of just sort of all the hideous policy and other things that he would do, because I felt like I needed to have that fluency. So if you ever ran into anybody and you wanted to, like, make your arguments and make your points. So I would run, every few days to my computer and jot down the latest, whatever. And at some point, I don't remember if it was a year or 2 years into his presidency, it was just obviously exhausting, and I must have gotten distracted, and I kind of stopped. And so when Trump got elected, I was like, this time I'm gonna go back to my task, and I'm gonna do it more consistently. And then, of course, it wasn't an every few days kind of thing. It was like an every 5 minutes. And I realized it wasn't the exhaustion. It was sort of like a soul sucking kind of experience to be documenting these injustices with such regularity. And I wanted to circle that back to a comment that you made that I thought was very interesting, which is this conversation has focused a lot on sort of the moral question of wrath, and if we engage in it, and is it okay, and to indulge our vengeance and those instincts, and it's seductive, and is it helping, and is it functional? But the thing that you said that stood out a little bit even more for me was the notion of protecting yourself from the human suffering of just being on the losing end of all of these injustices. You know, like for me, the Merrick Garland thing is like, just, I can't ever seem to get that. I mean, it's like such a bowl of wrong that you just don't know what to do with it. And anytime I circle back to these, I realize that I'm just in an emotional state that's deeply unpleasant. And you put some sort of neurological statistics to it about, you know, your risk of a heart attack and an aneurysm and whatnot. And so I guess it seems to me one survival technique is I mean, to survive, you need to figure out how to keep yourself above that fray while obviously still doing the things that need to be done to fight the fight. But emotionally, how do you protect yourself? And I mean, the only strategy I've thought of recently was to give some thought to how abusive Trump's childhood must have been to produce this dysfunctional, excessive amount of narcissism. Like whatever lesson he must have learned as a young child about the only acceptable forms of being to get love. And you know, you forget that because now he's a grown adult doing nothing but hideous things every 5 minutes. But that was a helpful way to try to just remember, like, this little kid must have been so abused by either his father or who knows what that story is to become this. And so that's one strategy. Sometimes I try to, but I was just wondering what other people use to help protect themselves from those really very ultimately adverse sort of forms of self-suffering for, you know. So anyway, that was my question.
Well, it's a great question. Let's put it to the group. Does anyone have a strategy that they use that works or that doesn't work? David? You're muted.
My mother, who I see is on here, always said something very smart to us. And she said, if you walk around with shit in your pocket, it's your own pocket that smells. And sometimes very good advice that I tell myself sometimes, and excuse the language, but it I find it helpful that when I find myself being consumed by wrath or rage or other really negative things by what I sometimes see in the world, I sometimes feel it's good to take a deep breath and a step back and say, all right, I got to get a handle on this because I'm not making things any better by walking around in this state. Doesn't always work, but I could try.
Any other, Susan Freudenheim?
Yeah, I try to think about the arc of justice, but arc of, what is it? The
Arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice.
Yeah, that's what I try to think about. And so take actions, letter writing, postcard writing, volunteering, whatever, because it is a little bit of the Michelle Obama way. I mean, it doesn't help me to get more and more crazy, but I do sort of believe that. And I think that, I mean, I hope we're going to see that take action. That's what's going to occur now. I hope that anyway.
I have a 15-minute rule. Like I can have self-pity or real rage and anger for 15 minutes. And if I'm really going through it, I like to break it up into 3 5-minute pieces. And then I try and just move on because I can't stay there for too long. It just takes too much out of me. But I do think I'm allowed to be super pissed off and look at lists of things that I hate about people. And then I try and move on. I have a 15-minute rule.
So Claudia, what you just showed me, because you were unmuted, is that we can have a conversation without being called on. So I would suggest that if you have something to say, why don't you unmute yourself and just start saying it. And as long as we don't talk over each other, we'll be okay.
May I do that? Am I on?
You are.
I feel that given Trump's behavior now, that we cannot afford the luxury of making ourselves feel better to have a strategy to somehow rationalize this. I think we are under very direct threat of things that go wildly wrong personally, nationally, internationally. We have somebody who really could bring us the most terrible consequences. And we are reminded that even if it works up until the election, that he is still has the nuclear code and everything else until January. And we have a very dangerous man. I don't think we can afford to make ourselves better. I think we have to make our world safe. I don't know how to do it, but I would pray for that.
Thank you.
I think wrath can be really destructive and self-destructive, and it can serve a purpose to mobilize and become active, to fight for good and fight for what you believe is good. But I also want to recognize that wrath focused on Trump is still energy focused on Trump. And I believe in the laws of attraction. And the universe doesn't distinguish between negative attention and positive attention. And as long as we put all our attention on Trump, we risk not actually going towards the light and what we really want to have happen. The best thing we can do is ignore him, and go towards what we want to see happen.
I've been saying that for a long time. Take him off the air. Don't let him spread his lies. But that's, I think, very naive, because
That's not what.
then we are out of the conversation.
I don't think he was saying take him off the
I
air.
use
He
my
was saying
husband
don't-
as my filter.
No, it's something that we each have to decide to do personally. It's not something that we should take him off the air. It's just understanding that if you want to stay angry at him and keep cursing him, you're not helping your own goal.
Well, part of the trouble is it isn't just Trump. It's a whole administration, the attorney general, all, the whole machine they have in place. And we, people that seem to be of more rational mind, try to address this in a logical way, and logic does not seem to be coming into play these days. And to see one egregious act after another with no consequence. I mean, these fake polling boxes, I mean, where you can drop your, why has no one been arrested? Why is there never any consequence for any of this incredibly damaging illegal behavior? If there was any indication, we wonder why kids aren't interested in voting. They see that the system is not working right now. So their frustration is completely legit. And I don't have answers, unfortunately, except I use whatever little task I can do and focus on that. That's where I put my energy and attention.
Is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak, because we're moving into
Yeah.
I have I find some comfort in listening to Chris Cuomo and Bill Maher and Fareed Zakaria. They seem to express a lot of my feelings, and they publicize it. And I, at least for the hour, I feel a little bit better.
Beth, I see you have your hand up if you want to unmute.
I don't know if anyone heard me.
So I was, it's Jim Holmes, not Beth this time, but I was just going to say, just to go back to this idea of wrath, which brings in the problems with Antifa and everything, is that I think the wisdom of the 7 deadly sins is you can't become a victim of this, that wrath is you out of control. And one of the things that you said, Marty, was that wrath produces anxiety, which is bad for you. But I think what we're all experiencing now is wrath that is the product of our anxiety. That we have this anxiety, and where our hope is diminished because we don't see a lot of possibility. To sort of tie it back to some of what David was saying, dignity to me is not something you earn, it's something you practice, which is I think what John Lewis was arguing for and Martin Luther King, that you can compete and put your positions out there without allowing yourself to go crazy and smash windows and burn police cars because you've got a sense of a loss of hope and you've let your wrath get away with you. And even in a war, you don't want to go in like the light brigade and all just get shot screaming into, you know, cannons to the left of you and right of you. You have to be strategic and measured and rational on some level. And as wrong as I think Mitch McConnell is, he's certainly taken a very successful, rational approach to stacking the justice system, which is a real problem for us. And I feel like people need to be strategic and they need to fight back, but they need to do it with dignity and not a loss of control. So,
other voices or points of view?
I had my mute on, but
Sure.
you know, again, it's just to me, it's through a funhouse mirror, because here we are in a state that's completely dominated by the Democrats. I mean, I've voted both ways, but I didn't vote for Gavin Newsom. I think he's an idiot. I mean, not an idiot, but I don't think he's a good governor. And, you know, I just got to suck it up if I'm going to live here. I mean, because look at the group here and look at the results. I mean, you're talking about the national election, which I think you'll be happy. So I think you can relax. But so I guess, and I'm kind of, again, the people, Julie knows, you know, I can get angry. I can get wrathful. It's certainly that's kind of why I wanted to plug in here. But I've just had to, because I think you guys don't know what the bubble, frankly.
David, if you can hear me, you have frozen and there you go.
I'll come back.
Well timed.
Any other voices we haven't heard from that?
Bernice, if you want to lower your hand and you want to speak.
Okay. I have a practical question. When I was never aware that wrath became revenge, and I'd watched Brad Pitt, and he became revenge instead of, you know, it was kind of intertwined. And I'd like to ask your practical wisdom on when does wrath stop so that it doesn't become revengeful. I have young kids, most of us do have, you know, whether they're old kids or young kids. I'm concerned about my kids going out into the world and where we are at the moment, and how that, you know, if they say something wrong and there's some fruitcake there who takes it the wrong way and it exacerbates into an explosion, how do we practically contain that?
So I'm going to offer this as an answer and maybe my last comment for the evening, which is, I think it goes back to that Dorothy Sayers comment that it's when wrath is when the love of justice is perverted. And I think that what we must do is love justice. That's what we ought to be up to. Be the best lover and most active lovers of justice that we can be. So in doing that, I can see the risks of turning what you think of the love of justice to be into vengeance or revenge. But there's also fairness requires punishment and consequences. That's not always vengeance or revenge or getting even. It's respecting the social contract which we have made with one another to have rules and norms. So I think it's relative. I mean, it's impossible to stifle our human emotions, but we all try to do it. It's even harder to in the midst of all that, to focus on loving justice. And so that's the opposite of a deadly sin, but maybe is David's secret agenda to get us to focus on.
Thank you, Marty. What I would say in my response, if you don't mind, is that that to speak to what some of you have said, what Lois said, I hate Donald Trump. I shouldn't say this with the job I have, but I hate Donald Trump with every bone in my body. I think he's a cancer on our world that is creating so many problems, not just nuclear problems, denying climate change for anyone who knows anyone younger than ourselves. And I think he's just an awful man in every way. But I do think that, he fills me with wrath, obviously. But as somebody said on the side, Dawn, we have to look at the people that put him there and not feel wrathful, like Dave was saying, I think about people in bubbles, we're all in bubbles. But look to people who put him there, why they're so angry, try to understand why they're so angry, hear them and see them. Hopefully they will hear us and see us. And what our real job is going to be, starting on November 4th, whatever happens, is to bring this country back together in a civil way. Donald Trump is incapable of that. Hopefully, wherever we go, that's the job facing us. And I think that is the best way I can see to moving through my wrathfulness and darkness of feelings I never thought I would feel before. That said, I want to thank you, Marty, for doing an awesome job and getting us off to a great start on this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, as always. And thank you, all you nice folks, for being a part of this and throwing yourselves into it. And it's really wonderful. We're going to be back on November 11th. With Pride is what we're going to, we might be, based on this discussion, we might be in Wrath Park too, but it will nominally be Pride with Amy Willens, who's a good friend and a professor of English at UCI and a wonderful person. Marty, anything else you want to add?
I am honored to have done this and thrilled to have seen old friends, and I hope to make some new ones.
Thank you all very much. Be well. Go out and vote, and
vote.
Don't get too mad.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. I'll see you all soon. Thanks tomorrow too. Bye-bye.
Bye.